my fellow comic book collectors, it's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this is the Wednesday video where I answer your questions. And we got some pretty good ones. This is a pretty interesting list of questions that were asked this week. And I'm going to show some pretty cool books as a result. And if you have a question that you want answered, put it in the comments below and I will answer it next week. Let's get into the questions. The first question comes from Mark Webb, who asked, it might seem strange, it's like a strange question, but I trust your encyclopedic knowledge that will have an answer. I'm not sure how great my knowledge is, but I do try my best, and I do have a Google at my fingertips. So if I don't know, I Google. Are there any issues from comic book series for which there are known copies to exist? In other words, do you know of any series that had, for example, 50 issues in its run, but maybe there are no known issues of issue 31 to exist? So there is one that I can think of that's kind of like that. Like A1 number 2 is Gerber 9, okay? Now, if you look up A1 comics number 2, they'll actually denote it as being, like I think it's labeled as actually number 3. It's not, or there is no number 3. So there's like, it goes A1 2, like A1 is actually the name of the comic, and then it goes A1 4. So there is no issue 3. But A1 ran actually fairly long. There are other books that are Gerber 9s that are part of longer series. And there's actually one that's even a Gerber 10 that's part of a longer series. Now, there are issues, for example, even in Warren collecting. If you try to collect Warren Presents, there's actually, like, they number them, some of them, and some, like, it's, like, debatable about what issues they would be. So, for example, like, it goes, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then for a second, then there'll be one issue number that's missing, and then, but they release some one-shot, and then, so I guess it's that one-shot is supposed to be a Warren Presents, and then you sort of put it in the numbering system, and things like that. There are times like that, and it happens with comics as well, where you get these weird things where they kind of jump the numbering system, and the numbering system kind of goes all over the place. 4-Color was notorious for that, where they'd have like some weird numbering going on with their issues. Even more recently, they did something with, I believe, with Batman and all those ones, where they brought back the old numbering system, even though they had done mini-series in between, and so the numbering is not quite correct. But what this kind of leads me to kind of believe that you might want to know more about would be the Gerber system, and what are some of the rarest books that are actually part of a bigger series. So I quickly want to give a rundown of what the Gerber system is. So quickly, the Gerber system is a scale from 1 to 11. And Gerber basically created what's called the photo journal. And when he did that, he was getting all the images of all the books from the Golden Age. And he, cataloged them all. And in the process of cataloging all these Golden Age books, he basically found that some were harder to find than others. And just like you were asking, like, is there like issue number 31, for example? Well, he would find it and he would assume that there would be an issue 31 or something like that. And often he would just put a blank because he didn't have a photo, even though he had gone to these really great collectors to find photos of pretty much everything. So there's a lot of books where it's just like a blank photo. And based on his experience of dealing with all these high-end collectors and their knowledge, he kind of made a guide of that 1 to 11, where he said, okay, this book must be really scarce because nobody seems to know about where it is or what it is and what it looks like. And that was really kind of where the Gerber scale came from. Now, from really if it's a 7 on the Gerber scale, it's something which is considered scarce, and there might be 50 copies of it. Well, if it gets to an 8, it becomes rare, and then there's only maybe 11 to 20 copies of it. If it gets to 9, it's a very rare, and that's 6 to 10 copies known to exist. If it's 10, that's actually the highest you can get, where it's still, there's knowledge of a comic existing out there. And that is considered unique. And that means that there's less than 5 copies out there. Now, if it gets to 11, it's non-existent. It doesn't, there's nothing, no idea if this comic ever existed or it does exist. It's just non-existent. It's hard to find. Or, well, you can't even find it. It's non-existent. So that's the guide. Now, what I was looking into, just to answer your question a little bit more, was books that are in that 9 to 10 range, where there's less than maybe 10 copies known to exist in all of the collections out there. And the rarest book that I could find from the Gerber guide was a WoW number 2. Now, WoW actually ran fairly long. So that's the first series of WoW comics. I believe WoW later became Mary Marvel's series. So WoW number 2, really hard to find. It's Gerber 10. A1, 2, I mentioned. A1 number 2, really hard to find. Star Comics number 11, really hard to find. Atomic Thunderbolt number 2. Captain Arrow number 9. Catman number 13 was denoted as Gerber 9, but has since, there's copies that have kind of emerged since then. It's maybe a Gerber 8 or 7 now. Then there was Liberty Comics number 4 and 5. And then Famous Funnies, which is actually a very long-running series, like it ran over 200 issues. Number 9 is almost impossible to find. So issue number 9, super rare. And then Foremost Comics, number 41, which is volume, I'm not sure what the volume issue number would be, but it's denoted as being issue number 41, super rare. And Keen Comics number 1 is ultra rare. So there's a few that would be part of a major series, like Famous Funnies, that would be kind of in that thing where, is there actually an issue like in there? It's just quite hard to find those books. So I hope that helps. As I said, sometimes it's numbering things that are out there that kind of will, it'll skip numbers. That does happen fairly often in the Golden Age. But hopefully that answers your question. Next question is a bit of a joke one, but I'll read it anyways. It's from Fiddle Chips. He wrote, I would like to hire Judo Man and the Warmonger for a child's birthday party. While you have your comic battles, please put masking tape on all the naughty bits. Also, please tell Steppo to bring Tommy to keep the children in line. Let me know your rates. Are you willing to do a first communion? Thank you for your time. So, so if you're not familiar, my friend Steven, who comes on this Mondays and Fridays shows, we basically, we show cool comics. He has an amazing collection. And we actually had a comic battle on All Sorts of Words channel, where we would put on a persona, and I put on a persona of Judo Man, which is me basically digging up my old judo gi, putting that on and just being silly. And he put on a persona of the Warmonger, which is really his natural persona. So he's like toting with his guns and stuff, and he's being a typical American. Yeah, how it is. Okay, so he was doing his gun thing, and and we battled with comics, and he actually won fairly, maybe. I was checking. I'm just being silly. He showed some pretty amazing comics. I showed some pretty amazing comics, and he won. He showed a Batman 1. I mean, it's like, how do I compete with that? So, it was a pretty great battle between the two of us. So yeah, so we joke about it often. Whenever we meet, we kind of joke about it. He always rubs it in my face that he's the victor. But there will be a rematch someday, and Judo Man will get his revenge. Maybe at a children's party near you. Who knows? But our rates would be astronomical. I just, it is what it is. were massive celebrities. So we would just charge a fortune. I don't know, not many people could afford our rates, so probably not worth it. Okay. I'm just being silly, but okay, next question comes from K Munin. Thanks as always for answering my questions. What is your favorite fight scene in comics? Out of all comic book characters, who had the best first appearance? Okay, so I'm going to actually show a bunch of books for this question. One of the things that I always think of when I think of the best fight scene, and it's a weird one because it's kind of like so obvious that it's like it seems kind of lame to even show it, but I'm going to show it. And it's one that I don't know why. Whenever I go into a hard meeting, I actually think about this scene, and it's this book, Hulk 181. And it's sort of like these things. I just think of the Wolverine kind of powering up and having his claws pop out. I think of that whenever I go into a meeting. I'm like, oh, I gotta power up, get my claws out. And I think of Wolverine and this appearance of Wolverine and this fight between the two of them, between Wolverine and the Hulk, I really like because there's like so many elements to it that I enjoy. You got Wolverine kind of doing this flying attack where his claws are just like slicing down on the Hulk, and you got Hulk kind of looks like he's doing like sort of a swoop, like his Hulk smash on the Wolverine. So you get that just classic elements to both characters where you can see this is what they do when they fight, and that's what I like about it. So I automatically always think about this fight scene. I just love this fight scene. Even though it's on a cover, I just enjoy it as probably one of my favorite panels or covers for fight scenes. So that would be my choice. I know there's probably better ones out there, but for me, I don't know. It's just something about it. I gravitate to this one cover for in terms of classic fight scenes. Okay, next question. Next part of that question, I should say, is out of all your comic book character, of all the comic book characters, who had the best first appearance? I would say Superman, but I'm going to show you some other first appearances that I really like as well. But I really do think Superman had the best first appearance, and I think in a way, kind of time has shown that to be the case, whether or not I say it or not, because what we have with Superman is the collector's trio of things that you want to get in a comic book. So his first appearance is Action Comics number 1, 1938, and what you have on the cover, you have Superman being super. You have that iconic thing where he's holding up the car, and everyone's like panicking, like just this. It's like wow, and that scene, what it does is two things. You get to see what the character looks like because he's on the cover, and it also showcases what he is about. What is his power? He is super strong. Okay, he is amazing that way, and that is always a cool thing. So that is right off the cover. One of the things you want to do is when you collect first appearances, well, you want to get the first appearance, you want to get the first cover appearance, and the other big thing that collectors gravitate to in terms of characters is their origin. And with Action Comics number 1, you get all three of those things. So within the comic itself, they explain the origin of Superman, and you get to learn how he became the character he is today. And really, right off the bat, they knew they had a very fleshed out character. A lot of times when characters are introduced in comics, they really don't know, like they don't really know where the character is going to go. And you kind of see that, like, even like, for example, Wonder Woman, they kind of had some of her nuances about what it is she is, but she didn't have the lasso. She didn't have like certain things that you kind of associate, like the jet, certain things that you associate with Wonder Woman, didn't appear until later issues. With Superman, you really get a lot of that right at the beginning. And that's why I think his first appearance is kind of the biggest first appearance. And it's one that really changed comic book history. So obviously that in itself puts it as being the most important first appearance and probably the best origin as well. I'm going to show some other books though, because I have to show some books. It doesn't make sense to not show anything after saying all that. So I'm going to show you some very first appearances that I actually thought were pretty cool. We got Poison Ivy, and I'm going to show you why. I'm going to tell you quickly why I like these first appearances. I love first appearances when they do this kind of silly thing. When you got the character on the cover kind of presenting themselves, right? And, it says like, beware of Poison Ivy. It's like, and if you're not sure, is she the cause of their rift? And it's like, they're already setting up some kind of like story in this whole thing. And it's not only just like the typical, like nowadays with comics, you get the kind of typical stance thing where they're standing on the cover. Oh, they're standing on the cover. It's like, there's no story there. But this, even though it's a standing on the cover thing, it's telling a story. It's showing Robin and Batman, they're all grumpy at each other. But why? What is this woman, what has she done over them? What has she like hypnotized them? What has she done? And you're curious to find out what is this girl has done, and who is this Poison Ivy character. So I kind of like that. So this is one of the ones I would say. Another one is similar idea. And DC did a really good job of this. Is again, you got the new character front and center, and you got these kind of word bubbles that are kind of hinting at who is this character, what is she all about. So meet the new Batgirl. Is she a heroine or a villainess? What is her startling secret identity? The $1 million debut of Batgirl. All of this is just really great hype. And I they're presenting the character, they're showing meet new Batgirl, just a lot of great stuff. I just love this as a first appearance. I like my girls, both the sexy girls. Hey, I like their first appearances. So we got Detective Comics number 359. Okay, the next one is a Marvel book. I'm just showing the first appearances, some cool ones that I like. Hopefully you enjoy this. And this is, again, something I really like, where you got his name right at the top here, Iron Man. Got him presented, and you get to realize that this is a man putting on a suit. You can see him, like, you see all the pieces of the suit, and he's putting it on. And it's like, who? It's like, and, and then they say, he lives, he walks, he conquers. It's just kind of exciting. Not quite as well done as DC in my mind, because it doesn't really showcase like some of those things that the Poison Ivy one especially did, where it's like, how does this new character interact with other characters, and create that curiosity. But it does show a little bit of his suit and what he's all about. So I do like this one as well. So those are a couple, and got two more to show. And again, I love these ones where the character is introduced and you, where they put the name on it. You got the character, and I like these ones like Detective 38 because literally the character is like doing the typical like circus thing where they go through the paper tray or whatever it's called. And they are being introduced. I do love that whole circus kind of feel to it. And in this case, it actually is very relevant to Robin and his origin, because he has those circus, pieces of his origin. And in this, his parents die. It's pretty tragic. His story is pretty crazy. And it's just a really great first appearance. And I love when they showcase the character this way. So this one is another one that's pretty great first appearance of a major character, where you get the trifecta. That was the word I was looking for earlier. The trio. I was like, trifecta. That's the word I was looking for. Where he's on the cover. He's like he got his name on the cover even, and he is his origin is explained. So you get really that history about who this character is. You get everything about him all in one book. So definitely a major one. So first appearance, first cover, and first origin all in one book. So that's the trifecta. So, and then the last one, same idea, and probably the most iconic of all of these covers is Amazing Fantasy 15. And Spider-Man's like they love the tragic the tragic story. You know, Robin had it, and Amazing Spider-Man had it as well, where he's got the tragic backstory. It just seems like a thing that they love to do with comic book characters. They can't be all perfect. Spider-Man, you know, he loses his uncle, and you know his uncle survives one issue, basically. You know, it's like pretty tragic. So you got you know, Spider-Man also showing what he's all about. He's like carrying the guy with one arm, showing his strength. He's showing how he's swinging on his webbing. And you can see him in that classic hero pose where you see him front and center. His name is right above him. And you get to learn who the character is through his origin story inside. So really a great first appearance. And this one, I would actually say, is the next to Superman's origin and first appearance. This would be the next best one because it is got all that going for it. And it does set up a very interesting story that makes you really engaged in the character. So, yeah, so Amazing Fantasy 15. So those are my first appearances. I thought it'd be interesting to show those. Hope you enjoyed it. Okay. Next question comes from Tim Ryerson. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Ryerson? Ryerson? Okay, I'm going to guess that. Okay, Alan, do you have any golden or Silver Age vintage comics with detached centerfolds? What is the highest grade that you have with such a defect? What should a buyer consider before purchasing a vintage comic with a detached centerfold? Very interested in your perspective. Okay, so if you look at my comics, for the most part, there's a lot of restored books. There's a lot of low-grade books. So I have lots of books that have a detached cover or detached centerfold. If the cover is detached, the highest grade you can get is a 3.0. And I probably have somewhere in my collection a 3.0 detached cover. Generally, if it's a detached cover at that high of a grade, you can actually have two things happen. And this is kind of something a little bit that CGC doesn't always mention, but it is true. What can happen is you either get a 3.0, which is a beauty, like this has to be a really, really great presenting comic, and it's a 3.0 because that's the highest you get with a detached cover. However, sometimes you can actually have what's called a green label detached cover, where it's a high grade, and they'll denote it as a high grade, but then the green, why it's got the green label is they'll say it's a detached cover. I've seen that as well. I don't have any of those in my collection, but I have seen them where you get these high grade ones that are actually green labels, but the only thing that's flawed with them is the detached cover. So something to be aware of. Now, if the centerfold is detached, the highest grade you can get is a 2.5. I don't know why it's harsher on the centerfold. But if it's detached at one staple, you can get from a 3.0 to a 4.5. And you can get if it's slightly loose, like if it looks like it's about to fall out, or if it's detaching, I should say, then you can get between a 5.0 and a 6.5. So those are all the different grade points that you can get based on the level of detachment of the either centerfold or cover. Now, should you buy these kind of books? Definitely. You know, there's two things that I like to buy, and sounds lame, but I actually don't mind buying low grades, because a lot of the books that I really, really like are ones that are pretty expensive if you don't buy the low grades. However, on the flip side of that, I also really want to get something that presents well. You see, I display my books. I have all of them behind me. So I like that display element, but I also like the low grade element where it's cheaper. So how do you balance those two out? One of the things that I will look for is a really, really sharp presenting cover that has a spine split. Okay? Now that's even worse than detached, because the spine could be completely split and you'll get the covers kind of, will fall off, right? Those generally are graded at a 1.0. Sometimes they actually grade even lower than that. They can grade at a 0.5, where the comic is complete, but it has a complete spine split, and it grades at a 1, as a 0.5, I should say, 0.5. Those books, you're basically paying based on the grade, and they're very affordable. I've seen beautiful presenting books. They could, if it wasn't a spine split, you could say, oh, this is like a 9.0. Very beautiful looking book, but it just happens to have a spine split. When it's in the slab, you cannot see that. You don't know, it looks perfectly fine. So those I see as buying opportunities, because it achieves these two things: cheap price with good presenting comics. Another way I achieve that is through buying restored books. You'll notice the Wonder Woman behind me. It's like a high grade, but it's restored. So I got it at a very affordable price. And often that is the case with restored books, where you can get really, really amazing presenting books at a really affordable price. Even cheaper than books that are incomplete, which never made sense to me. So those are some of the things that I'd say with that. So definitely look, again, it's like buy the book, not the grade, I guess is kind of the thing. Like, a lot of collectors will look for a really nice presenting book. Generally, that's what you're aiming for, and especially if it's in a slab, nobody sees that it's mangled or whatever. Okay, so yeah, so that's my opinion on that. AJ Guez wrote, thanks for answering my questions. One of your price variance videos, you mentioned the first female superhero as being Canadian. I can't remember her name. Could you share some of her history, her powers, and some issues you might have? As you said, there was a stamp with her on it. Do you have a picture of that? Who owns the IP today? Okay, so I'll answer the last part of that first. The current IP for Nirvana of the Northern Lights is her name. Nirvana of the Northern Lights. I'll say it twice just so it's a long name. Current IP is owned by the Library and Archives of Canada and the Nirvana Limited. Okay. Now her first appearance is the book I have. I don't really have many of her appearances. Her appearances were in Canadian Whites, which are fairly rare, and I don't have any with her. The one, though, that I do have is her first appearance in this book. And this is a coverless copy. It's very rare, so there's only 3 known copies to exist. So this would be a unique item. So this is Triumph Adventure Comics number 1 from 1941. And she actually appeared before Wonder Woman. So this is the origin and first appearance of Nirvana of the Northern Lights. Now, Nirvana was kind of like semi-god, like kind of in similar to the way Thor is. Basically, the Inuit would pray for somebody to help them battling, people that are either overfishing in their area, or in later issues it became the Nazis that she would ultimately be fighting against. But basically they would pray, and then they gave like an origin story where they explained her and her brother. Like, her brother is kind of shamed. He cannot show his true physical self because he's been shamed by the gods. And so he can only appear on Earth as a dog. And so she's often riding him as a mount. And her powers, she can, control, kind of like Storm in a little way, in some ways. She can also use the power of the Northern Lights to power herself up. And she goes up against, as I said, Nazis and stuff like that. So her powers are not as clearly defined as some other characters, I would have to say. But she does have superpowers. And often, if you, the stamp, basically on it, she's kind of like in this action pose. And she has like feathers in her hair. I actually have the stamp somewhere, but I have no idea. I think my stamp collection is in my basement, and it's sort of buried. I have no idea how I'm ever going to get to my stamp collection because it's really buried. Yeah, it's a bit of a mess, but yeah. So there is a stamp. You'd have to look up Nirvana, and you can find it. If you look up Nirvana, Nelvana, stamp, and you'll find her stamps everywhere. They're pretty easy to get. So I hope that helps with answering that question. But again, if you can find a covered copy of this, that'd be the ideal place to get it. Her first appearance. Books with her on the cover actually go for pretty big money. The original cover for this one was actually kind of lame. Not the most interesting cover. Actually, this looks better than the original cover. The original cover is just like a bunch of planes. It's not really a great cover. But some of the covers with her on it, like she appeared in multiple issues of Triumph, are pretty cool. Like, she's a pretty cool character. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question. Okay, Quasi Terrible asked, "Hey Alan, can I ask what age do you think a kid should start judo? And is it a good martial art for girls to practice? My daughter is 5 now, and I was thinking of putting her in some classes." Okay, judo is okay for girls, but there's a couple issues, and I kind of have to explain this about judo. So 5 is a great age to start judo. They'll learn how to fall, and it's actually quite useful, and actually those kind of skills. Another thing that they'll learn is just basic gripping and getting used to moving with somebody else. Often you'll learn how to tumble. And so if if your daughter likes gymnastics, she'll like judo because there's a lot of similarities. But age 5 is actually really, if you get them in that early, they'll become an Olympic medalist if they stick with it and they really enjoy it. Now, the problem with judo for girls is later on, and this is an issue. A lot of the holds are chest to chest, and some girls find that disturbing. Girls guys will not wear a shirt underneath their gi, but girls will generally wear a sports bra and a shirt and then their gi. But just that physical weight and the pressure against girls' chest, sometimes they don't like that. And some girls aren't really comfortable about fighting with men, and it can be an issue. It's just something to be aware of. It's really how comfortable is she with physical contact, because judo is very physical in terms of the contact. Unlike most martial arts are, very karate, if you think, or taekwondo, you're like kicking, you're doing all these things. You're not necessarily grabbing onto people or doing like anything where it's a lot of body contact. I mean, there's sometimes where they do practice moves with a partner, But when it's a striking sport versus a grappling, which is judo, generally what will end up happening is it's about that comfort level with, you know, how you feel about touching other people. Basically, you are touching other people, and a lot of touching. You know, it's really that comfort level. Another thing that can be scary, especially for young kids when they start judo, and I actually have a funny story about this, was one of the things that I would do is I would get the big crash mat out, and I would get my students to line up, and everybody throws each other. And it'd just be a fun way to throw, because you're landing on the crash mat, so there's no one getting hurt or anything like that. And you get used to that idea of falling, where you're not, a lot of the time when people fight and they're afraid of falling, they tense up and they do things that actually can actually work against them. It actually makes them hit harder on the ground or have things where they can get injured. If you have no fear of falling, you actually fight better. It's a thing. So one of the things you got to do is get people out of that fear of falling. So I had the kids all lining up. I had them throwing each other, and I also threw them myself. And when I throw them, I go low because they're kids, and you have to go really low. And I threw them over my shoulder, and I do it in such a way that it's very safe. I've done it thousands of times. So the point is, one of the people that was watching, and this was a mistake that this other person did, was they saw me go low and they saw me throw this little kid over my shoulder and landing in the crash mat, and they were perfectly fine. They were shocked by me going down low, and they were like, "Oh, they were more shocked by me going low, but in the way that they kind of like, oh, like that, like kind of surprised." It startled the kid. That startled the kid, not me throwing them. That was fine. Them being shocked about me going down low and the throw made the student scared. And they actually got scared as a result. So one of the things you have to do is never act shocked. Sort of like when kids get injured. If you go, "Oh my God, you're going to die," kind of thing, the kid will freak out. If you go, "Okay, it's nothing serious. It's not too bad. Your arm, it'll grow back." If you kind of play it down, the kid will get more comfortable. Often people overreact, and it can cause bigger issues in the long term. So that was one experience that I had, and I got in trouble for it. But that's because people reacted wrong, and they reacted wrong to the right. It was just dumb. It's like one of those things, like it is a physical sport. There's throwing, they're getting thrown, you're landing on the ground. You got to get used to that. So again, it's about sometimes people react wrong, and you gotta get that out of them. So just part of the interesting thing about judo, it is a very good martial art in terms of, especially for women, because it does utilize lower center of balance, lower center of gravity, I should say. With girls, their hips bring their center of balance down lower, and that's actually an advantage for women in the sport. It's very good self-defense. If you are experienced with judo, you can get out of bad situations, and that's very important for women. So it is a good one to learn. That's my very biased opinion of judo. Okay, so next part of your question, which is back to comics again. And for my comic book question, what books are the most difficult to tell if it's a reprint or not, or what printing it is? Like Zap Comics #1, having to figure out which printing it is always annoys me. That's true pretty much about all of the underground comics. Really annoying to figure out what printing they are, especially first print and second print. Usually by third print, the price has changed, and that's usually the way you can tell what printing it is. But often they wouldn't denote what printing the book was, which is really annoying. Why don't they? And you would have to look for subtle things that they did within the printing process where they didn't quite get the same inks or whatever. And that was what you would use to determine Is it a first print or second print? It's an annoying thing, especially the underground comics. It was a thing that happened a lot. Okay, but there was one book that I actually, when I read your question, this is the book that actually came up to my mind first. And I'm going to show you my copy. This is Ultimate Fallout number 4. And when they reprinted this book, they did not make it obvious. They didn't say second printing or, you know, or put the thing down the side where it says True Believers or something like that, where it's like obvious reprint. They would just basically print it and make it look almost identical to the original. And that was really frustrating to me because when I got to my comic shop, when they first released it, the reprint, they had a stack of Ultimate Fallout number 4s, and I was like, oh wow, that's pretty amazing. And I was like, okay, these have to be second printings, but there was nowhere on the thing that said second printing. I was like, what's going on here? However, there were indications from, if you know Ultimate Fallout, this is the first print. If you know the difference between the first print and the second print, you can identify them very easily. And just so you know, I'm not alone in this, that, you know, oh, I can't figure out, I didn't know which was a first print, which was a second print. It was actually, even CGC had that issue where they actually graded a 9.8 second printing as if it was a first print. So not just me. So with this, there's around this, see, there's nothing. On the second printing, this is red around there. Another thing that you can use is the barcode. On this, it is 00411. On the second print, you'll see, let me put it this way, maybe make it more easy to see. See 00411. That means that it is the 4th issue in the title, and it's the first printing, which is the 1. Now, if that was on the reprints, it's actually 11111 because it's considered to be a one-shot and the first printing of the one-shot. It's one of those weird things. So those are the two most obvious ways to tell this one if it's a first print or second print. But as I said, probably the worst ones are the underground comics. Okay, last question comes from my good friend Matt. Matt likes comics. He wrote, which is your favorite horror book, and has there ever been one you've read where you think they've gone too far? One of my favorite horror titles was Fistful of Blood. Great series. Simon Beasley artwork and sexy girls, zombies, vampires, biker gangs. What better stuff you can have? It's a great title. Fistful of Blood, awesome title. Another great one though is one that goes. Okay, so there's usually a line you can't cross with gore and just disturbingness. Well, this book literally is crossed, and it goes across that line. This is crossed, and now when basically it's psychopathic killers, like they're just psychopaths, and they're kind of like zombies. They zombies with an attitude, I guess. They go around and they rape, they pillage, they do weird things, they chop you up, they do sadistic things. That's how these people behave when they get the virus, and it creates a cross down their face like this, okay? And that's when you know that they have it and they're going to be a psychopath. And so basically it's zombie psychopaths. Well, they do crazy things throughout the series. Well, this series is crossed psychopath number 1, and they go even further. It just goes way beyond extreme. So I'll give you an example, and the cover pretty much answers your question. And I'll show you. I'm just going to take it out. So I'm not sure if you can see this, but this is like a guy, and he's sort of calmly sitting there, and you see like guts spewing out of this device, okay? And it's a wood chipper, actually. But what you don't see is the other side, which is little kids, and they're all having good fun, and they got the guy with the cross. He's like the psychopath, and he's like basically sending the kids down the slide into the wood chipper. That's the level of crossed, okay? Very sadistic, I would have to say. But actually good stories. Like, you know, if you can get around the absolute gore, it does have pretty amazing stories. Very, very well written, strangely. Like, it's one title that has actually a whole bunch of series and issues, because they're able to keep the story going for quite a long time, and there's like these little arcs that are just really fascinating. But it is full on gore. It is disturbing. It's over the top. Sometimes you gotta kind of pause. You gotta go, okay, I think that's enough. It is kind of over the top. Actually, I was looking, like, in preparing for this video, I picked up I had my witchcraft, not witchcraft, Witch's Tales number 25, which is the head in the belfry cover, where you got the head and the clappers, you got the bell and the clapper is a head, decapitated head. And I thought, oh, the story inside must be as gory or as crazy. Pretty tame story inside, comparatively. Like the three or four stories that were inside were pretty tame, like in comparison to the cover. So a lot of the pre-code horror was gore and craziness on the cover, but pretty tame stories on the inside for the most part. Like, not to this level of gore and extremeness. Like, this would be like, wow, like light years more gory and more crazy than anything that you would ever experience in the Golden Age. So that's kind of what I want to mention there. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed these answers. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have a question, put it in the comments below. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.